The wind in Wyoming does not ask permission. It comes down from the north like a blade, shearing the dead grass from the hills and sending dust devils spinning across the plains. It was a land that scraped a man down to his bones, and Wyatt Langston had been scraped raw for 34 years. He topped the last rise, his horse, a big roan, blowing hard. Below him lay the ranch. The cottonwoods along the creek were bare, their branches like brittle claws against a sky the color of old tin. The main house and the barn looked smaller than he remembered, hunched against the vast, empty land. He had been gone 2 years, 2 years of building an empire of cattle in Montana, of fighting off rustlers and winter storms and the quiet dread that came in the night. He was a wealthy man now, a cattle baron, but the wealth had settled on him like a shroud, cold and heavy. He urged the roan forward, his face set in the hard lines that had become his habit. He felt nothing of a homecoming. He felt only the familiar ache of duty, a task to be performed. His parents were old. He had sent money, more than enough, but letters from his father, Silas, had grown shaky and infrequent. The last one, 6 months back, had been almost illegible. It was time to see to them, to make arrangements. As he drew closer, something felt wrong, or rather, something felt right that should have been wrong. There was a thin curl of clean smoke from the chimney, not the usual sputtering smoke of damp wood. The porch, which he remembered as cluttered with broken tack and wind-blown leaves, was swept clean. A patch of canvas had been neatly tacked over the broken window on the west side. He dismounted, his boots sinking into the dry, cold dirt. The air was still, heavy with the smell of snow on its way. He looped the reins over the hitching post and climbed the steps, his spurs making a lonely, metallic sound. He pushed the door open without knocking. The house was warm. The main room was tidy. The floors were swept, the sparse furniture dusted. A pot bubbled over the hearth, smelling of rabbit stew. He stood in the doorway, his long duster coat dripping melted frost onto the floorboards. And for a moment, he thought he was in the wrong place. Then he saw his father. Silas Langston was propped up in his old chair by the fire, a thick quilt drawn over his lap. His eyes were closed, his face thin and pale as bleached parchment. But he was clean-shaven. His white hair was combed. "Father?" Wyatt's voice was rough from disuse. Silas's eyes fluttered open. They were watery and dim, struggling to focus. "Wyatt, son, is that you?" Before Wyatt could answer, a woman emerged from his mother's bedroom. She was young, perhaps 25. She was thin, dressed in a faded calico dress that had been mended so many times the patches overlapped. She carried a small basin of water. When she saw him, she stopped dead. Her body went rigid, her hands tightening on the basin. She was not a beautiful woman in the way of the salaried girls in Cheyenne, but her face had a stillness to it, with wide, tired eyes the color of the prairie grass in autumn. Wyatt's eyes swept over her, taking in the worn dress, the thinness of her frame, and the way she stood in his house. His suspicion was immediate, a cold, hard knot in his gut. He had seen this type before, the leech, the grifter, the woman who waits for the old and the weak to die. "Who in the hell are you?" he demanded. The words came out colder than he intended, but he did not care. The woman flinched, just slightly, but she did not lower her gaze. "I am Clara Sutton, sir." Her voice was quiet, low, and held no trace of greeting. "Clara," his father breathed, a small, relieved smile touching his lips. "He is here. Wyatt is home." Clara Sutton turned her gaze from Wyatt to Silas, and the hardness in her face softened instantly, replaced by a tenderness that stunned Wyatt. She set the basin down and moved to Silas's chair, adjusting the quilt around his shoulders. "That is good news. Mr. Langston, now let me see to your wife." She made to move past Wyatt, toward the hearth to heat the water, but he blocked her path. He was a big man, and he filled the space, bringing the cold of the outside with him. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What are you doing in my parents' home?" Clara stopped, her hands clasping in front of her. She looked at the floor for a moment before raising her eyes to his. They were clear, and to his surprise, held no fear, only a deep, abiding weariness. "I am caring for them," she said simply. Caring for them? Or waiting for them? He saw the color rise in her pale cheeks and pressed his advantage. "My father is frail. My mother is ailing. It looks like a fine opportunity for a woman with no connections. How much have you convinced them to promise you?" "Wyatt!" His father's voice was sharp, though thin as a reed. "You will stop that. You will not speak to Mrs. Sutton that way." "Mrs. Sutton," Wyatt repeated, the word tasting like venom. "So there is a husband. Where is he? Is he in on this too?" Clara's hands twisted together. "My husband is dead, sir." "Convenient," Wyatt sneered. "He was killed 2 months back, accused of horse theft. They shot him north of Laramie." She stated it as a fact, like reporting the weather. Wyatt studied her. He knew what that meant. A horse thief's wife was worse than a widow. She was an outcast, tainted by the crime. It made her presence here even more suspect. She was desperate. "And so you came here," he said, "to feed off my family." "That is enough. Wyatt!" This voice came from the bedroom. It was his mother's. Eliza. It was frail, but held the same iron that had ruled this house for 40 years. Clara moved toward the bedroom, but Wyatt grabbed her arm. It was a reflex, the need to control the situation, but he was shocked at what he felt. Her arm was bone-thin beneath the rough fabric. He could feel the fragile bones, the lack of substance. He released her as if burned. Clara rubbed her arm, her eyes flashing for the first time. "Do not put your hands on me, sir." She disappeared into the bedroom. Wyatt heard his mother's soft, coughing greeting, and Clara's murmured, gentle reply. He turned back to his father. Silas was watching him, his expression a mixture of disappointment and fear. "She has been here since August. Son," Silas said, his voice trembling slightly. We were not well. The cold was setting in. I had fallen. Your mother could not lift me." Wyatt's gut clenched. This was what he had feared. "Why did you not send for me? The money I sent—" "Money does not fetch water when your back is broken, Wyatt," Silas said, his voice flat. "Money does not cook food when your hands shake so bad you cannot hold a spoon. We were dying. I am not saying it to be cruel. It is the truth. We were cold, and we were hungry, and we were waiting for the end." Wyatt looked away, his jaw tight. He stared into the fire, which Clara had clearly built and tended. "Then she came," Silas continued, "knocked on the door in the middle of a rainstorm, soaked to the skin, looked half-starved. She asked only if she could sleep in the barn. In exchange for chores, she asked for nothing else. And you let her in." "She chopped wood for an hour before I could even answer her proper. She saw your mother in her chair, shaking with fever, and she just took over. She found the last of the herbs. She made a broth. She did not ask for payment. She asked to help." "She is playing you, father," Wyatt said, his voice raw. "She knows who I am, who this family is. She is working her way in, to get at the ranch, at the inheritance." "The inheritance?" Silas gave a dry, rattling laugh. "What inheritance? Wyatt, this crumbling house? A few head of cattle you left behind? You are the inheritance. Son, you own everything. This ranch belongs to you, not us. We are just living here on your good graces." The words hit Wyatt harder than a physical blow. It was true. He had bought the deed from his father 5 years ago when Silas's debts grew too deep. He had done it to save the ranch, but it had made him the master, and them his dependents. Clara reemerged from the bedroom, her face pale but composed. Your mother would like to see you, Mr. Langston. She is weak, but she is awake. Wyatt strode past her, his mind reeling. He entered the small, cold bedroom. His mother, Eliza, was buried under a mountain of quilts. Her face was a ruin of wrinkles and pain, but her eyes were still sharp, still his mother's eyes. "Wyatt," she whispered. He knelt by the bed, taking her small, gnarled hand. It was cold. "I am here, Mother." "You were cruel to that girl," she breathed. "After all she has done." "I am protecting you, Mother, protecting this family." "She is this family now," Eliza insisted, a surprising strength in her voice. "We would be dead. Wyatt, do you understand me? Dead, Silas in his chair and me in this bed. Last winter, oh, it was so cold. The hands you hired to look in on us, they stopped coming, said the pay was not worth the ride. But Clara, she stayed. She slept on the floor by this bed. She rubbed my feet when they went numb. She hauled water in the blizzard when the wellhead froze. She saved us." "Why?" Att squeezed his eyes shut. This was not what he had expected. He had expected to find neglect, to find filth. He had come prepared to rage, to hire a new man, to perhaps move them into town. He had not come prepared to find them cared for, loved even, by a stranger, a horse thief's widow. "She is an outcast, Mother," he said, his voice low. "The town has branded her." "The town?" Eliza scoffed, a weak cough rattling her chest. "What does the town know? They gossip, they whisper, they say she is a bad omen. They say because her husband turned to thieving, and because she lost her child that she is cursed." Wyatt looked up. "Child?" "She had a baby daughter, lost her to fever 2 winters ago, before her husband went bad. That is why they shun her. They say she brings bad luck. They will not hire her. They will not sell to her. She came to us with nothing but the clothes on her back and a pride that was stiffer than a frozen rope." Wyatt stood up, pacing the small room. It was all too complicated. It was a mess of emotion, and he despised messes of emotion. "She has to go," he said. "No," Eliza's voice was firm. "I will hire a proper nurse from Cheyenne. I will pay for a full-time hand. She is a risk. We do not know her." "I know her," Eliza said, her eyes boring into his. "I know her heart. You will not send her away. Wyatt, not now. Winter is coming. You saw the sky. A storm is on its way. To send her out in that it is a death sentence, and I will not have it." "Mother, I am asking you, as your mother, let her stay, at least through the winter. Let her stay." Wyatt looked at his mother's pleading face, at the desperation in her eyes. He was trapped. He was the cattle baron, the man who commanded 100 men, but in this small, cold room, he had no power. "Through the winter," he said, the words clipping. "But she is not family. She is help, and she will be paid. I will not have her here for scraps. She will take a wage, and she will leave in the spring." A look of profound relief crossed his mother's face. "Thank you, son, thank you. Now go. You look tired. Clara has stew." He left the room, his shoulders stiff with resentment. Clara was standing by the hearth, ladling stew into a bowl. She did not look at him. She simply held the bowl out. He ignored it. "I am going to see to my horse and the stock." "I fed the stock," she said, her voice quiet. "The chickens are in. The 2 cows are in the barn, with fresh hay. Your horse is all that is left." He stared at her. She had done the work. His work. "I will see to my own horse," he bit out. He turned and slammed the door behind him, welcoming the biting cold that slapped his face. The sky was low and bruised, a deep, churning purple. The wind was picking up, whining around the corners of the barn. He led the roan inside. The warmth and smell of hay and animals a small comfort, as she had said. The 2 milk cows were settled, their breath pluming in the cold air. The stalls were clean. He worked on his horse with rough, angry movements, brushing the trail dust from the roan's coat, checking his hooves. He was furious. Furious at the woman for being here. Furious at his parents for needing her. And furious at himself for being gone so long that this could happen. By the time he finished, the first flakes of snow were swirling in the air. They were not soft, gentle flakes, but hard, stinging pellets. The wind was howling now, a rising scream. He pulled his hat low and ran from the barn to the house, the snow already thick enough to cover his boot prints. He burst back into the warm room. The smell of the stew was overpowering, and his stomach cramped with a hunger he had not realized he felt. Clara was sitting at the small kitchen table, mending one of his father's shirts by the light of an oil lamp. His father was asleep in his chair. The house was quiet, save for the roar of the wind outside. She looked up as he entered, her expression unreadable. She motioned with her head toward the hearth, where a bowl of stew sat on the stones, covered by a plate to keep it warm. Wyatt hesitated. He would not be served by this woman, but the hunger was a physical pain. He crossed the room, grabbed the bowl, and took the spoon. He did not sit. He stood by the window, his back to her, and ate. The stew was hot, rich, and good. It was the first real food he had eaten in days. He ate quickly, angrily, feeling her presence behind him like a weight. "The storm is here," she said, not looking up from her sewing. "It will be a bad one. The wood I brought in as much as I could, but the big logs are still outside." "I will handle the wood," he said gruffly. "Not tonight, you will not," she replied, her voice calm and factual. "It is a blizzard now. You would not make it to the woodpile and back." He said nothing, because he knew she was right. The windows were rattling in their frames. The snow was a solid, roaring sheet of white against the glass. They were trapped, all of them. He finished the stew and put the bowl on the table. Harder than necessary. "My mother says you lost a child." He did not know why he said it. It was cruel, an invasion. Clara's needle stopped. Her head bowed, and for a long moment, she did not move. When she looked up, her eyes were not sad. They were empty. A cold, barren emptiness that mirrored the land outside. "Yes," she whispered. "My Rose. She was 2. "And your husband?" "He, Amos, was a good man," she said, her voice catching for the first time. "Until the fever took our girl. He broke. He started drinking. He fell in with bad men. What they said he did, but he was not a monster. He was just broken." "And they shunned you," Wyatt said. It was not a question. "They said I was a bad omen," she said, her voice hollow. "First my baby, then my husband. They said I carried death with me. The preacher's wife told me I was cursed, that I had brought ruin to my own house. No one would give me work. No one would even sell me flour. I walked for 3 days before I found this place." Wyatt looked at this woman, this bad omen. She looked more like a starved bird, yet she had held his parents' lives in her hands, and she had not let them fall. The storm howled, a living thing trying to tear the house from its foundations. The night deepened. Wyatt pulled a chair from the table and sat by the fire, opposite his sleeping father. He did not want to be near her. He did not want to be in the same room. Clara finished her mending, folded the shirt neatly, and placed it on the table. She checked on Silas, pulling the quilt higher. Then she went to the small, cold pantry, and Wyatt heard her moving things. She came out with a thin bedroll. She walked to the hearth, far from him, near his mother's door. She spread the bedroll on the hard wooden floor. "What are you doing?" he asked. "This is where I sleep," she said, as if it were obvious. "In case your mother calls for me." She took off her worn boots and lay down on the bedroll, pulling a thin, patched blanket over herself. She turned her back to him and the fire, and within minutes, her breathing evened out. Wyatt sat in the firelight, the storm raging outside, his father snoring softly in his chair, and the horse thief's widow sleeping on his floor. He stayed awake for a long time, watching her. He watched the steady rise and fall of her breathing. He watched the firelight catch the dull brown of her hair. He was a man who understood cattle and land and profit and loss. He did not understand this. As the night wore on, he found himself observing, really observing. He saw the bucket of water she had hauled, now sitting by the stove for the morning. He saw the neat stack of kindling she had prepared for the morning fire. He saw the way his father's hand, which usually hung limp, was resting on the arm of the chair, relaxed. He went to the wood box. It was, as she had said, full to the brim with split logs, enough for the night and the next morning. She had done that. She, with her bone-thin arms, had hauled and split and stacked this wood. He looked back at her, a small, still shape on the floor. He noticed her hands, which rested near her face, even in the dim light. He could see they were not soft. They were red, chapped, the knuckles swollen. The palms, he knew without looking, would be covered in calluses. They were the hands of a field worker, of a man. He had come home expecting to fight a predator. He had found something else. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending a spray of sparks. Silas mumbled in his sleep. A fever dream. Eliza Water. Before Wyatt could even move, Clara was up. She was not fully awake, but she moved on instinct. She rose from the floor like a ghost, picked up the dipper from the water bucket, and went to Silas's side. "I am here, Mr. Langston," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "It is Clara, just a dream." She held the dipper to his lips. He drank a little, sighed, and settled back into sleep. She stood there for a long moment, one hand resting on the old man's shoulder, just watching him breathe. Then, without a sound, she returned to her bedroll and lay back down. Wyatt watched it all. He said nothing. He felt the ice of his certainty, the hard, cold suspicion that had been his shield for years, begin to crack. It was a small crack, almost invisible, but it was there, and it terrified him. The world was white. For 3 days, the blizzard owned the ranch. It was not a storm. It was a siege. The wind did not howl. It screamed, a high, thin sound that plucked at the nerves. The cold was a physical weight, pressing against the thin cabin walls, seeping through the chinks. The windows were blind, caked with ice and driven snow. The house was a small, dark box buried in a frozen sea. Wyatt woke from his stiff position in the chair. His neck ached. Across the room, Clara was already moving, her bare feet silent on the floorboards. She added a log to the fire, the only source of light and life. His father, Silas, was asleep in his chair. His mother's soft cough came from the bedroom. It was the 3rd morning. The house grew colder by the hour. The lamp oil was low, and Wyatt had ordered Clara to use only the firelight. He was still the master of the house, and he gave orders. She, in turn, ignored the order and kept one small lamp lit. Its flame turned low. "Your parents need to see a friendly face, not just shadows," she had said, and he had not argued. A new sound joined the wind's cry, a groan, followed by a sharp crack. Wyatt was on his feet instantly. He looked at the ceiling. What was that? Clara's face was pale in the dim light. "The porch roof. It holds the snow. It must be too heavy." Another sound, a splintering tear, and a heavy, sodden thump. The front door rattled in its frame. Wyatt strode to the door and pulled it open. A wall of white fell inward, spilling onto the floor. The wind blasted into the room, sending ashes and sparks from the hearth. "Get it closed!" Clara yelled, pushing against the snow with her body. He slammed his shoulder against the door, fighting the drift, and finally forced it shut. Throwing the bolt, he stood breathing hard. the icy sting of the outside air still on his face. "The porch roof has collapsed," he said. It was not a guess. "It is piling snow against the door." "It is pulling on the wall," Clara said, her voice tight. She pointed to the timbers near the doorframe. A thin line of fresh snow was visible in the gap. "If the drift gets high enough, it will push the wall in, or the weight of the roof will pull it down." He knew she was right. He had seen it before. A house could be crushed like a paper box. He grabbed his heavy coat. "I have to cut the beams. Free the collapsed section from the house." "Wyatt, you cannot," she said, her voice flat. "It is a white wall out there. You will be blind in 2 steps. "I have to." He pulled on his gloves, grabbed the heavy axe from beside the hearth. He looked more like a man going to war than to his own front porch. "Then I am coming," she said, grabbing her own thin, threadbare shawl. "You will stay inside. You will freeze in a minute. You will need someone to hold the rope, to pull the timbers clear, or they will fall on you. Or do you plan to hold the beam and cut it at the same time?" She did not wait for an answer. She wrapped the shawl tight around her head, covering her mouth, and took a length of rope from the peg. He glared at her, but there was no time. He could feel the house groaning. He opened the door again, and they plunged into the chaos. It was not air, it was a solid, moving thing. The wind stole his breath, punching him in the chest. Snow filled his eyes, his mouth. He was blind. He stumbled, feeling for the collapsed section. He found it, a mountain of snow and splintered wood. Clara was beside him, a small, dark shape in the swirling white. She held the lamp, but it was useless, a tiny speck of light in a void. "Hold this," he bellowed over the wind, handing her the end of the rope. He climbed onto the drift, the axe feeling small in his hands. He had to sever the main rafter that was still attached to the house, pulling on the wall. He found it, slick with ice. He braced himself, his boots sinking deep. He swung the axe. The wood was frozen, hard as iron. The blade bit, but did not cut deep. He swung again and again, his breath tearing in his lungs. "It is shifting!" Clara screamed. He felt it before he heard her, a terrible, sliding groan. The snow under his feet gave way. He was not just on a snowdrift, he was on the broken roof itself. The whole mass was sliding. "Why, get back!" he yelled. A secondary beam, one he had not seen, snapped under the tension and swung free. It moved with the speed of a striking snake. It did not fall on him, but it slammed hard into his side, a brutal, numbing impact that knocked the air from his lungs. He was thrown backward, off the pile, hitting his head against the solid ice of the porch post he had been trying to save. He fell into the deep snow at the edge of the porch, dazed. The world was gone. There was only white, and a high ringing sound in his ears. He felt the snow piling on top of him, a cold, heavy blanket. He had a dim thought. This is how it ends, drowning in the dry. Then she was there. Her face was inches from his, her shawl gone, her hair wild and caked with ice. She was shaking him, her thin hands surprisingly strong. "Wyatt, get up now!" She was not pleading. She was commanding. She grabbed the collar of his coat and dragged him. He felt the raw pain in his side, sharp and hot. He tried to stand, his legs buckling. "Now!" she screamed. He found his feet, leaning on her. She was a frail thing, but she held him up, together. They stumbled, blind and frozen, back toward the rectangle of dim light that was the doorway. They fell through it, collapsing onto the floor, dragging a mountain of snow with them. Clara slammed the door shut, her entire body thrown against it, and dropped the bolt. For a long moment, they just lay there, gasping. The room was icy, snow covered the floor, but they were inside. "Father, Mother, are you all right?" Clara called out, her voice raw. "What is happening?" Eliza cried from the bedroom. "Clara, the noise!" "It is nothing," Mrs. Langston, Clara called back, her voice remarkably steady as she climbed to her feet. Just the wind. A bit of snow came in, but we are safe. Go back to sleep. I will bring you some warm broth soon. Wyatt watched her. She was lying to them, lying to keep them calm. He pushed himself up to a sitting position, a groan tearing from him. His side was on fire. He touched his temple and his glove came away dark. You are bleeding, she said. She was shaking, her skin blue with cold, but her eyes were focused on him. I am fine, he grunted, trying to stand. The room tilted. You are not. Sit by the fire. He wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her he was the master of this house, that he did not take orders, but the blood was dripping into his eye, and the pain in his side made him nauseous. He did his best to stalk to the chair, but it was more of a stumble. She was already there with a basin of water, the same basin, it seemed, she used for everything, and a strip of clean cloth. I can do it, he said, reaching for the cloth. You cannot see it, she said, pushing his hand away. Hold still. He wreck a good God, man. Hold still. He froze. Her fingers, chapped and rough, were surprisingly gentle as she dabbed at the cut on his temple. He flinched, not from the sting of the water, but from her touch. It had been years since anyone had touched him with this kind of simple, impersonal care. It is not deep, she murmured, more to herself than to him. But you hit your head hard. Where else? I am fine. Your side, she stated. The beam. It is a bruise. Let me see. No, the word was a growl. She met his gaze. Her own eyes were not soft. They were as hard as the frozen land. But they were not unkind. Mr. Langston, I have seen men die from foolish pride. If you have broken a rib, you could puncture a lung. I am already caring for 2 invalids. I will not have a third. He glared at her, his jaw set, but her logic was infuriatingly sound. He was trapped, slowly, grudgingly. He unbuttoned his heavy flannel shirt, pulling the fabric away from his skin. Clara drew in a sharp breath. A massive, dark purple bruise was already spreading across his ribs, an ugly map of the impact. She probed the area with her fingers. Her touch was light, but firm. He sucked in a breath when she found the center of the pain, his muscles tensing. Breathe, she commanded. I do not think anything is broken, but it will be hard to move for a while. She went to a small chest where she kept her herbs and remedies. She returned with a small tin jar. When she opened it, the sharp, clean smell of pine and menthol cut through the stuffy air. This will help, she said. She dipped her fingers into the salve and, without asking permission, began to rub it onto the bruised skin. Her hand was warm. The salve was cold. The combination was a shock to his system. He watched her face as she worked. She was focused entirely on the task, her expression serious. He was intensely aware of her, of the way her damp hair clung to her cheek, of the small, tired lines around her eyes. He felt something stir deep in his gut, a low, coiling warmth that had nothing to do with the salve. It was a feeling he had not allowed himself in years. It was base, and it was human, and he hated it. He hated her for making him feel it. He jerked back, pulling his shirt closed. That is enough. I am fine. She did not look surprised. She simply nodded, put the lid back on the tin, and went to clean the basin. The porch will have to wait, she said, her back to him. We are trapped until the storm passes. The storm raged for 2 more days. The world shrank to the 4 walls of that room. They were a strange, broken family, trapped by the white fury of the sky. Wyatt's side throbbed. He sat by the fire, brooding, watching. He watched Clara move. She was a creature of endless, quiet routine. She tended his parents, her voice always soft, always patient. She cooked what little food they had, thin broth, dry biscuits. She melted snow for water, and she mended, always, in the quiet moments. She sat with her needle, mending clothes that were already more patched than fabric. On the third night, the storm's fury finally began to quiet. The wind still moaned, but the high, tearing scream had faded. The silence left behind was heavy, thick. Silas and Eliza were sleeping. The fire crackled. The single lamp cast flickering shadows. Wyatt sat staring into the flames, his bruised ribs aching. Clara was sewing by the lamplight. He could not stand the silence. "My mother said you lost your child," he said. His voice was rough, too loud in the small space. Clara's needle stopped. She did not look up. Her hands, holding the fabric, went perfectly still. "Yes," she said. Her voice was so quiet he barely heard it. She said it was a fever. Clara set the sewing in her lap. She looked at her hands for a long moment. Her name was Rose. She was 2. She had her father's eyes, but she had my hair. She finally looked up, and her eyes were fixed on a place Wyatt could not see. She was never sick, not a day. Then the fever came. It came so fast. I boiled herbs. I used cold rags from the creek. I prayed until my throat was raw. The doctor from town, he would not come. He said it was just a child's fever, and he was too busy. She looked down at her hands again. She burned up in my arms. Mr. Langston, for 2 days, she was on fire, and then she just got cold. She stopped fighting. It was so quiet. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She did not sob or sniffle. She just let it fall. After she was gone, Clara continued, her voice hollow, the town whispered, "Mrs. Gable, the preacher's wife. She came to my cabin. She told me it was God's judgment, that I had not been a dutiful enough wife, that my heart was cold, that God had punished me." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "When my husband, Amos, started drinking when he fell in with those men, they said it was my fault, too, that I had driven him to it. When he was shot, they said I was a curse, a bad omen. They said I brought ruin to everyone I touched." Wyatt watched her. He saw not a curse, but a woman who had been flayed alive by life, and was still, somehow, standing. He felt a sudden, sharp compulsion to match her pain, to show her the darkness he carried. "The war," he said, his voice hard. "I was 17, barely shaving. We were on patrol near Shiloh. Just a mess of muddy trees and gunfire. My captain pointed, said, 'Rebel soldier, by the creek. Take him.' So I did." He stared into the fire. Seeing it, "I raised my rifle. I shot. He fell, just folded over. We moved up. I went to him to see. He was not a soldier. He was a boy, younger than me, 15, maybe. He was not holding a rifle. He was holding a fishing pole." Wyatt clenched his fist. "He was just a boy, fishing, unarmed. My captain slapped me on the back, said, 'Good shot, Langston.' I have killed men since, men who were trying to kill me, men who were stealing my cattle. But him I murdered him, and I have never forgiven myself." He had not known he was going to say it. The words left a bitter taste in his mouth. He felt a hot tear track down his own cheek and angrily wiped it away. The silence that filled the room now was different. It was not empty. It was a shared, heavy thing. Clara stood up from her chair. She moved slowly, as if in a dream. She crossed the small space between them and stood before him. He tensed, ready to ward off what? Pity? He did not know. She did not speak. She simply raised her hand, the one with the chapped knuckles and the calloused palm, and laid it flat against his chest, right over his heart. Her touch was light. It was not a lover's touch. It was not a gesture of pity. It was understanding. It was the touch of one broken thing acknowledging another. But it burned him. He could feel the warmth of her palm through his shirt. He could feel the slight tremor in her fingers. He looked down at her hand, then up at her face. Her eyes were soft, no longer empty, but full of a deep, shared sorrow. The warmth that had stirred in him before The one he had pushed away returned with a vengeance. It was a hot, sudden flood, a deep, primal ache. He wanted to pull her down, to bury his face in her hair, to feel the life in her. He was ashamed of his desire, ashamed of feeling it for this woman, in this house, with his parents sleeping feet away. He jerked back so violently his chair scraped the floor. "Do not!" he snarled, his voice a harsh rasp. Clara pulled her hand back as if she had touched the hot stove, her face flooded with confusion, then shame. I am sorry. I only—" "Do not," he said again. He stood, his bruised side screaming in protest. He grabbed his coat. "Mr. Langston? Wyatt?" she asked, startled. "Where are you going?" "The barn, to check the stock. But the storm it is still, you cannot—" "I will," he spat, and he ripped the door open. He plunged out into the frozen night, into the deep, clean snow, running from the woman and the warmth of her hand. The storm broke. The world was remade in white, silent and blinding. Wyatt spent the next 2 days in a foul temper, clearing the snow, repairing the porch, his side a constant, dull ache. He and Clara did not speak, unless it was about his parents. The brief, fragile connection in the darkness was gone, replaced by an awkward, brittle tension. He needed to get away. He needed to feel like himself again. "The supplies are low," he announced on the 4th morning. "I am riding to Red Creek." Before he left, he went to his father's chair. Silas was awake, his eyes clearer than Wyatt had seen them in years. "Son," Silas said, his voice quiet. "I am going to town. Father, I will be back before dark." "I saw you," Silas said, "during the storm. I saw how you look at her, at Clara." "I look at her like the outcast she is," Wyatt lied. "No, you do not," Silas said, his grip surprisingly firm on Wyatt's arm. "Not anymore. Son, listen to me. Your mother and I, we were lying here waiting to die. We were useless, just burdens." He looked past Wyatt, toward the kitchen where Clara was kneading dough for biscuits. "That girl, she did not just feed us. She did not just keep us warm. She gave us back our dignity. She would sit and read to your mother from that old, worn-out Bible. She would brush your mother's hair, even when Eliza was too weak to notice. She talked to us, like we were still people. That is a debt, Wyatt, one that money cannot pay." Wyatt's throat felt tight. He nodded, unable to speak. "I will be back." The ride to Red Creek was cold and bright. The snow was deep, the track hard to follow. The town was half buried, men shoveling roofs, their breath pluming. He pushed into the mercantile, the bell over the door jingling. "Mr. Langston!" Henderson, the shopkeeper, greeted him, rubbing his hands together. "Good to see you. Survived the storm. I see. It was a bad one." "It was," Wyatt said, dropping his list on the counter. "I need this, all of it, and a bottle of laudanum for my mother. Right away. Right away." Henderson scurried about, gathering the goods. "Heard you were holed up tight out at the ranch. Heard you got company." His voice dropped, taking on a slick, greasy tone. "I have," Wyatt said, his voice flat. "Heard you are housing the Sutton widow." Henderson leaned across the counter. "You want to be careful with that one. Mr. Langston. She is bad luck. Cursed. They say, first the baby, then the husband." He winked. "And, well, she was married to a horse thief. You know what they say about those women. Not exactly particular." Wyatt's hand, resting on the counter, clenched into a fist. Henderson, mistaking his silence for interest, chuckled. "Though I suppose a man gets mighty lonely in a blizzard. And housing that horse thief's woman is one way to stay warm, eh? Cheaper than a trip to Cheyenne. I reckon." Wyatt did not think. He reacted. His fist shot across the counter, a single, brutal blow that connected with Henderson's jaw. The man's head snapped back, and he crashed into a barrel of pickles, sliding to the floor in a daze. The store went silent. 2 other customers stared. Wyatt pulled a handful of gold coins from his pocket and threw them on the counter. "That is for the supplies. And the pickle barrel. Keep your tongue off my ranch." He gathered his things and strode out. His rage was a cold, clean fire. He was not angry at Henderson. He was angry at the whole rotten world that would kick a woman when she was down. He rode back fast, the fury pushing him on. When he got to the ranch, he saw it. A rock. It had been thrown through the small window by the door, the one he had just patched. He dropped the supply bags and stormed inside. Clara was standing by the hearth. Her thin shawl was on. Her bedroll, that same sad bundle, was tied at her feet. She was packing. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. She jumped, her back rigid. "I am leaving, Mr. Langston." Her voice was shaking, something he had never heard. "Leaving? Look outside. The snow is 3 feet deep. You will freeze before you hit the creek." "I must." "Why?" he roared. She pointed a trembling finger to the floor by the door. The rock lay there. Wrapped around it was a piece of brown paper. "Someone came," she whispered. "While you were gone. They threw this. They yelled horrible things." Wyatt crossed the room in 2 strides and snatched the rock. He ripped the paper off. Scrawled in rough charcoal was a single, ugly message. "Get out, Omen. Leave the decent folk alone." He crushed the paper in his fist. Henderson. The news had traveled as fast as a horse could run. "I cannot stay." Clara wept, and the sound of her sobs broke something in him. "I will not bring this on your parents. They are good people. I will not be the reason their home is attacked. I will not bring my curse to this house." "You are not a curse," he yelled, the words torn from his throat. "I am. They are right. I ruin everything. I should have left. I should have just walked into the snow." She was packing her last items, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie the string. He crossed the room and grabbed her arm. Not hard, like the first time, but firm. "You are not leaving." "You must let me go," she sobbed, trying to pull away. "No." He looked at her, really looked at her, at this small, terrified, brave woman who had faced down death and storms and gossip and was only now breaking. The ice that had surrounded his heart for a decade, the ice that had begun to crack in the storm, shattered into 1,000 pieces. "My parents," he said, his voice thick. "They need you." "You can hire someone." She shook her head, tears blinding her. "No," he said again. He stepped closer, taking her other arm. He was holding her now, forcing her to look at him. "You will stay, Clara," he said, and her name, his first time using it, was a raw sound in the quiet room. "You will stay." "I cannot." "You will stay, not just for them." He pulled her a fraction closer, his eyes locked on hers, his heart pounding a painful, unfamiliar rhythm against his bruised ribs. "Stay for me." Clara's sobbing stopped. It was as if he had thrown a bucket of ice water on her. She stood frozen, his hands still firm on her arms, and stared at him. The words hung in the air, foreign and heavy. "Stay for me." She searched his face, this hard, cold man who had looked at her with such suspicion. His eyes were not cold now. They were raw. They were the eyes of a man caught in a trap. The same way she was. He was not offering her pity. He was offering a rope, a shared one. She whispered, her voice broken. "I do not know what that means." "It means I do not want you to go," Wyatt said, his voice rough. He had said more than he intended, and he looked angry about it, his jaw tight. He released her arms, stepping back, as if her touch had burned him. He was already rebuilding his walls. "The snow is too deep. You will stay. We will say it is for my parents." Clara watched him turn away to the fire, his broad back a clear dismissal. She looked down at her packed bundle, then at the threatening note in his hand. He had not said it for her. He had said it for himself, and that was, perhaps, even more terrifying and more true. She slowly untied the knot on her bedroll. "Through the spring," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "I will stay through the spring. Then the roads will be clear and your mother will be stronger." Wyatt did not turn. He only nodded, a short, sharp dip of his head. Through the spring. A fragile peace settled on the ranch. Thin as new ice, the winter held on for another month, but the fury was gone. The days were quiet, marked by the routines of a small, confined life. Wyatt worked outside, his bruised ribs healing slow. He repaired the damage from the storm, his axe and hammer ringing clear in the cold, still air. Clara worked inside. She tended his parents. She cooked. She cleaned. But something was different. She was no longer just the help. Wyatt now spoke to her, not at her. "The flour is low," he would state, and she would reply, "We have enough cornmeal for a week, if I am careful." He started to eat at the table, not standing by the window like a restless wolf. He would sit across from her, the lamplight falling on them, and they would eat in a silence that was thick with unspoken words. His father, Silas, would watch them, a small, knowing look in his watery eyes. The real change came as the great thaw began. The world started to drip. The snow receded from the south-facing slopes, revealing the pale, dead grass beneath. The creek, which had been a ribbon of ice, began to crack and move, the sound of running water a promise. Wyatt was a cattle baron, and spring meant work. He sat one evening at the table with his ledgers, planning the spring roundup, figuring his losses. "You lost more than you think," Clara said quietly. She was mending one of his shirts, her needle moving in and out of the rough fabric. He looked up, annoyed. "What do you know of it?" "I know the north pasture," she said, not meeting his eye. "When I first came before I found this place, I walked the ridges. I was looking for stray cattle, anything I could perhaps trade for food. The coyote packs were thick up north. They wintered in the rocks by the ridge. They will have pulled down the weak ones, the ones you left there." Wyatt stared at her. He had planned to send his men north first. "How many?" "I saw 3 carcasses from the ridge," she said, "and the tracks were heavy. They are hungry. They will be waiting." She paused, then added, "The south pasture, by the cottonwoods, is safer. The creek bends there, and the ground is open. They cannot hunt as well." He studied her. She was right. He knew she was right. He had been thinking of the grass, not the threat. He made a note in his ledger, changing the plan. "You have a good eye for land." "I was raised on a farm, before," she said, just before. He nodded. "From now on, you will tell me what you see." It was not a request. It was an order, but it felt like a promotion. He was not just letting her stay. He was using her. He was trusting her mind. A warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. 2 days later, the land gave them something else. Wyatt was down by the creek, checking the banks for flood risk. When he found it, tucked in a hollow, sheltered by a tangle of dead willow, was a colt. It was young, born late and small, a pale buckskin. It was shivering, standing on 3 legs. The 4th held uselessly off the ground. A long, ugly gash, dark with dried blood, ran down its cannon bone. Wyatt's face hardened. He saw the wound, the weakness, the way the colt's ribs showed. It was coyote work. They had hamstrung it and left it, maybe driven off by its mother. "Damn it!" he muttered. He raised his rifle. It was a mercy. The animal was starving, and the leg was ruined. "No," He turned. Clara was standing 10 feet behind him, holding a bucket. She must have been coming to the creek for water.
"Step aside, Clara, it is suffering."
"No," she said again, her voice stronger. She walked past him, setting the bucket down. She approached the colt, her hands out, murmuring low and soft. The colt flinched, its eyes wide with terror. "Clara, the leg is gone. It is a waste."
"It is living,"
she said, her voice fierce. She looked at him over her shoulder, and her eyes were burning. "You see a loss, I see a flicker. Let me have it." "It will die. It will just take longer." "Give it to me," she insisted. "I will not ask for your help. I will not take food from your parents. I will use my own time. If I cannot save it, I will come to you myself and ask you to finish it. But let me try." He looked at her, at the stubborn set of her jaw. This was the woman who had survived the town. This was the woman who had slept on his floor. He saw her, pleading for this broken, useless thing. And he knew he was not just looking at a colt. He was looking at her. She was the bad omen, the one everyone had given up on. He lowered the rifle, his gut twisting. "Fine, but it is on you. Do not let it take from your duties to the house." "It will not," she said, her voice softening as she turned back to the colt. Wyatt watched for a long, angry moment. He was annoyed at the waste of time, annoyed at the sentiment. He was a practical man, but most of all, he was annoyed at the strange, deep ache in his chest as he watched her gently, patiently, coax the terrified animal to trust her. He turned and stalked back to the house, leaving her to her impossible task. For the next 3 weeks, the colt became Clara's shadow. She had half carried, half dragged it to the barn. Wyatt, pretending not to watch, saw her clean the wound. It was not as bad as he had thought. No bone was broken, but it was deep and badly infected. She used her own remedies, a poultice of boiled herbs and spider webs to staunch the bleeding. She tore strips from one of her own few undergarments to use as bandages. She spent every spare moment in that barn. She gave the colt part of her own meager rations of cornmeal, mixing it with warm water and molasses. Wyatt's parents became invested. "How is the little one?" His mother, Eliza, would ask every morning. "He is strong, Mrs. Langston," Clara would reply, a small, tired smile on her face. "He is a fighter." "That girl," Silas said to Wyatt one evening, as they watched her cross the yard to the barn. "She has a healing hand. She coaxes life back from the grave." Wyatt just grunted, but he watched. He saw the colt, which he had condemned to death, learn to put weight on the leg. He saw it nicker when Clara approached. One day, he saw her leading it out into the sun, the colt limping gamely behind her, its head butting her hand. His admiration for her, the respect he felt for her mind, was changing. It was deepening, mixing with the desire he had tried to bury. He respected her grit. He respected her refusal to accept defeat. He saw the life she was breathing back into this animal, the same way she had breathed it back into his parents, and he found himself wondering what it would feel alike to have that healing hand, that stubborn focus, turned on him. The thought made him restless. It made him angry. He kept his distance. Then the spring rains came. It was not a blizzard, but a cold, driving storm that turned the thawed ground to a sea of mud. It was a miserable, gray evening. Wyatt was in the house, adding a log to the fire, the tension in his shoulders tight. His parents were asleep. Clara was late. He told himself he did not care. She was a grown woman. But he found himself at the window, peering through the rain-lashed glass toward the barn. Finally, the door opened, and she burst in, a gust of cold, wet wind coming with her. She was soaked to the bone. Her thin dress, the one she had been wearing for months, was plastered to her body, clinging to every line. Her hair was dark with water, hanging in strands, dripping onto the floor. She was shivering, her lips blue. The colt, he got scared of the thunder. I had to, she chattered, crossing her arms, trying to rub warmth into them. Wyatt did not think. He moved. He grabbed his own heavy wool coat from the peg by the door. It was the one he wore in blizzards, thick and lined. He crossed the room and, before she could protest, he draped it over her small, trembling shoulders. The coat swallowed her. It was huge, warm, and heavy. It smelled of him, of leather and wood smoke, and the clean, cold air. Clara stopped shivering. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. She was standing so close he could see the individual drops of rain on her eyelashes. He could smell the rain on her skin. Their eyes locked. This time, it was different. It was not the shared grief of the lamplight. It was not the tension of the storm. This was something else. The house was silent save for the rain on the roof and the crackle of the fire. The world shrank to the small space between them. He looked at her mouth, and he knew he was going to kiss her. He knew she knew it, too. She did not pull away. She did not look down. She just watched him, her breathing shallow. He raised a hand, slowly, and touched her cheek. His thumb was rough against her cold, wet skin. "You will catch your death," he whispered, his voice thick. I am all right," she breathed. He leaned in. He was not a man for gentle seduction. He was a man of decision, but this one was hesitant. He brushed his lips against hers. A question. For a heartbeat. She was still. Then she let out a small, broken sound, and her lips softened under his. She kissed him back. It was like setting a match to dry tinder. The simple, tender brush of mouths was not enough. The unspoken attraction, the shared confinement, the respect, the desire, it all exploded. He was not a cold man. He was a man who had banked his fires so low he had almost forgotten they existed. His other hand came up, burying in her wet hair, tilting her head back. His mouth crushed down on hers, and it was not gentle. It was rough and hungry and desperate. It was the kiss of a starving man. She met his hunger. Her small, chapped hands came up and grabbed the front of his shirt, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a flood. She kissed him back with a matching desperation, a deep, aching need that she had buried for years. He pulled her body against his, lifting her slightly, pressing her back against the wall. He could feel the small, strong frame of her. Even through the heavy coat, he tore his mouth from hers, breathing her name. Clara, his voice a low groan, and kissed the line of her throat. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. He felt her go rigid in his arms. He felt the tremor that ran through her. It was not passion, it was fear. He pulled back, his own breathing harsh. He looked at her. Her eyes were wide and terrified. Her lips were red and swollen from his. She looked shaken and ashamed. He stepped away, running a hand through his own hair. He felt like he had been struck by lightning. She started, her voice a reedy whisper. She clutched the coat, his coat, around her like armor. I have not. No one has. She shook her head, unable to finish. No one has touched me since Amos died. Wyatt's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. He turned from her, staring into the fire, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. He, too, was shaken. I have not wanted anyone, he said, the words torn from him. In years. Not since it does not matter. He had not wanted, until her. The silence was deafening. Clara stood, shivering again, but this time from more than cold. She looked at him, at his broad, angry back. She had let this happen. She had wanted it, and it terrified her. Without a word, she turned and fled to the small pantry room that had become hers. She did not slam the door. She just closed it quietly, leaving him alone with the fire and the rain. The next morning, the tension was a blade. They did not speak. They did not look at each other. Clara served his father breakfast, her movements stiff. Wyatt drank his coffee standing up, his face a mask of cold fury. He made a decision. He was a man of action. He had broken the peace. Now he had to own it. "Go get your shawl," he said, his voice flat. Clara jumped, spilling a drop of coffee. "What?" "You heard me. We are riding to town." Her face went pale. "Town, Mr. Langston Wyatt. I cannot, after last time, after that note." "You need clothes," he said, cutting her off. "You are living in my house. You are caring for my parents. You will not do it dressed in rags." You can buy them for me. I can give you my measurements." "No," he said. "You are coming with me. You will pick them yourself." He looked at her, his eyes hard. "And you will walk beside me. Do you understand?" She did. Oh, she understood. This was not about dresses. This was a statement. He was drawing a line in the dirt. After the kiss, he was not hiding her. He was claiming her, in the only way he knew how. It was a terrifying, reckless, and brave thing to do. "Yes," she whispered. "I understand." The ride to Red Creek was silent. Wyatt rode his roan, his rifle in its scabbard. Clara rode the gentle mare he had given her, her back straight, her hands clasped tight on the reins. When they reached the town, it was just as before. People stopped. They stared. The whispers followed them like blowflies. Clara kept her eyes fixed forward, on Wyatt's back. He hitched the horses in front of the mercantile. He turned, and in front of everyone, he offered her his hand to help her dismount. It was a courtesy he had never offered before. She took it, his grip strong and warm. They walked side by side up the boardwalk. He pushed the door to the mercantile open. Henderson was there. When he saw them, Wyatt and Clara, together, his face went slack. "Mr. Langston, ma'am," he stammered. "Mrs. Sutton," Wyatt said, his voice loud enough for the entire store to hear. "Needs 2 new dresses, your best material, and boots, and underthings, and a new coat. Put it all on my account." Henderson nearly fell over himself trying to help. "Yes, sir, right away. Sir, ma'am, if you'll just this way." Clara, her cheeks burning, allowed herself to be led to the fabrics. She could feel Wyatt's presence behind her, a solid wall of heat. He did not watch her. He watched the door, daring anyone to enter. They left 20 minutes later, Wyatt carrying 2 large parcels. As they stepped back onto the boardwalk, the stairs were harder. A small group of men and women had gathered. Mrs. Gable, the preacher's wife, stood there, her face a mask of pinched disapproval. "Well, I never," she said, loud enough to carry. "Shameless, right in the street." Clara flinched, but Wyatt put a hand on the small of her back. "Keep walking," he murmured. A woman in the back, one Clara did not know, spat on the boardwalk, just missing the hem of her old dress. Tainted trash. "Keep walking," Wyatt said again, his voice harder. Then a man, a local loafer named Al Driscoll, who was often drunk, stepped forward. He had been in the store when Wyatt had hit Henderson. He grinned, showing broken teeth. "Playing the big man, ain't you, Langston?" Driscoll sneered. "Finally found a good use for that horse thief's whore. Have you?" The world stopped. Clara's breath left her body. Wyatt did not say a word. He did not raise his voice. He dropped the parcels. He took 1 step forward, and he hit Al Driscoll. It was not a barroom brawl. It was a single, brutal, calculated punch that landed with the sound of a falling side of beef. Driscoll went down like a sack of grain, his head hitting the boardwalk. He did not move. Wyatt stood over him, his chest heaving, his fist still clenched. "He is breathing," Wyatt said, his voice a low, lethal growl. To no one in particular. He looked up, his cold eyes sweeping the faces of the crowd. They shrank back. "She is Mrs. "Clara Sutton," he announced. "She is under my protection. If any man or woman speaks her name with disrespect again, they will answer to me. Am I understood?" No one moved. No one spoke. Mrs. Gable looked like she had swallowed a rock. Wyatt bent, picked up the parcels, and took Clara's arm. "Let's go home." He put her on her horse, mounted his, and they rode out of town, leaving a stunned silence and an unconscious man behind them. They did not speak the entire ride back. Clara was shaking so hard she could barely hold the reins. He had defended her. He had claimed her. He had punched a man for her. Her dead husband, Amos, had never done such a thing. That night, the house was quieter than it had ever been. His parents, sensing the electric tension, had gone to bed early. Wyatt was standing by the fire, staring into the flames. Clara was at the table, folding one of her new dresses. The fabric was soft, a deep blue. She had never owned anything so fine. "You should not have done that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You will make enemies of them all." "They were not my friends," he said, not turning. "They are cowards. They only understand one thing. You cannot just hit everyone." "I can," he said. He turned to face her. His eyes were dark, his face set in hard lines. "I will." He crossed the room and stood before her. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. "That kiss," he said, his voice low. "Last night, it was not, I did not plan it." "I know. Today in town, I did plan that." He took a deep breath. "I want you. Clara, I think you know that. I wanted you last night. I wanted you today. I want you now." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break. "But I will not." He struggled for the words. "This man who was not made for them. I will not have you as a secret. I will not have you in the shadows. And I will not let them call you what they call you. I will not have you as my woman. Not like that." She looked at him, confused. "Then what?" "I want you," he said again, his voice raw. "But I will only have you if you want me back, if you come to me willingly." He was offering her a choice. He was offering her respect. He was offering her all the power he had. She hesitated. The fear was a cold, sick knot in her stomach. He was offering protection. But love? Love was a lie. Love was what she had felt for her daughter, and she was gone. Love was what she had felt for Amos, and he had broken and left her with a thief's name. She was afraid. She was terrified of being hurt again, of being abandoned. "Wyatt," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I am broken. I am what they say. I am a bad omen. I will ruin you." "You are not," he said, his voice fierce, and he grabbed her hands. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You saved my parents. You saved that cult. You saved me." She looked at him, at this hard, impossible, violent, gentle man. He was offering her a life, not just an existence. He was offering to stand between her and the world. She was afraid, but as she looked at him, she realized she was, for the first time in years, truly alive. She let go of the dress. She stepped forward. She put her hands on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart. And then, with all the fear, and all the pain, and all the desperate, rising hope she had in her, she pulled his head down and kissed him. It was not tender. It was not hesitant. It was a fierce, claiming kiss. It was not a kiss of surrender. It was the kiss of a woman making a decision. It was a promise. And he met it, his arms wrapping around her, lifting her off the floor, and finally, holding on. That kiss changed the air in the house. It was not a home of peace. Now, it was a home of tension, a quiet, thrumming wire pulled tight between two people. Wyatt had claimed her, and Clara had claimed him back. But the world outside had not changed, and his parents were still frail. sleeping just a room away. So their new life began in the shadows, after the house was still. It was an intense, secret thing. He was a man of great appetites, and he had starved himself for years. Now, he found himself starved for her. It was not just the brush of her skin in the dark, though that was a fire he had almost forgotten. It was her voice. After his parents were asleep, he would come to her small pantry room, or she would, by a silent, unspoken agreement, slip into his. They would lie in the darkness, the only sound the distant creak or the settling of the house, and they would talk. He was not a man for small words. He did not court her with poetry. He told her the truth. "I am buying 300 head from the north," he said one night, his voice a low rumble in the dark, his hand tracing the line of her shoulder. "The investors in Cheyenne are pushing for a fast sale." "The grass is poor up there," she whispered back, her head resting on his chest. "You said so yourself. They will be thin. You will lose money on the transport." "It is what they want. It is not what you want. Your land, Wyatt, your name. You told me you wanted to build a herd that could survive the winters, not a quick turn for men in suits." He was silent for a long moment. He had never, in his life, had a partner. He had men who worked for him, and men he worked for. He had never had someone who saw the land the same way. He stroked her hair. "You should have been a cattle baron, Clara." "I am just a woman who knows what she sees," she said. In turn, he learned to listen. She told him, in small, halting pieces, about Rose. She loved the color yellow, Clara whispered one night, the tears silent in the dark. She found a patch of wild sunflowers by our old cabin. She called them day stars. I cannot look at them now. Wyatt did not tell her it would be all right. He did not offer clumsy comfort. He just held her. He held her while she shook with the old grief. And he let her cry. He let her break, knowing she would be whole again by morning. He was the only person on earth who had seen her break and not called her a curse. They learned each other's bodies in the quiet dark. For him, it was a release, a powerful, grounding thing. For her, it was a healing. Amos, in the end, had been a desperate, angry man. Wyatt was strong. He was solid. When he held her, she felt anchored. She felt, for the first time since her daughter's death, safe. Their days were a careful dance of quiet touches. His hand would brush the small of her back as he passed her at the hearth. She would hand him his coffee cup, her fingers lingering on his for just a heartbeat. Silas saw it all. He sat in his chair, his mind clearer than it had been in years, and a small, satisfied smile would touch his lips as he watched them. Eliza, in her bed, just seemed to feel the warmth. The house was no longer a cold, waiting place. It was alive. One afternoon, Wyatt came in from the outside, the smell of sun and leather on him. Clara was at the table, mending one of her old dresses. The new ones, the blue one and a green calico. She felt she had not earned them yet. He watched her needle, swift and sure, pulling the frayed edges of the gray fabric together. He saw her hands, still chapped, but no longer the raw, red hands of the starved woman he had found. He said nothing. He went to his own room, to the small chest that held his personal things. He opened it. The smell of cedar and old memories rose up. He reached to the bottom and pulled out a small, velvet-covered box. He returned to the main room. She was still sewing. He stood in front of her until she looked up. He did not speak. He just opened the box and held it out. Inside, on a bed of faded blue silk, lay a locket. It was small, silver, shaped like a heart, with tiny, etched flowers. It was tarnished with age. Clara looked at it, then at him, confused. "It was my sister's," Wyatt said, his voice quiet. "Sarah, she passed from lung fever when she was 19, a long time ago." Clara's hand went to her mouth. This was not a gift. This was an inheritance. She loved wildflowers. She was soft, not like this land. He looked at Clara. She would have liked you. You are not soft, but you are kind, and she was kind. He took the locket from the box. Turn around. Clara was shaking. She turned, her back to him. She lifted her hair, her hands trembling. He unhooked the simple chain and fastened it around her neck. The silver was cold against her warm skin. She turned back to face him. Her eyes were full of tears. She had received charity. She had received scorn. She had received passion, but she had never, in her life, received a treasure. She had never been given someone's memory. She touched the small, cool heart hanging at her throat. "Wyatt," she whispered, the word thick. "It belongs on you," he said gruffly, as if embarrassed. "It should not be in a box." She did not thank him. She simply stood up, put her arms around his waist, and laid her head against his chest, right over his heart. She cried. Not for sadness, not for grief. She cried because, for the first time, she felt seen. She felt like she belonged. The spring turned green. The ranch, which had been a place of ghosts and dust, felt new. The colt was the proof of it. His leg had healed. The ugly gash was a long, silver scar, but he was strong. He was no longer a limping, broken thing. He was a gangly, strong-willed creature, full of mischief. And he was devoted to Clara. He followed her everywhere. When she went to the creek for water, he trotted behind her. When she was in the small garden she had planted, he would stand at the fence, his head over the rail, waiting for her. Wyatt watched them. He saw the way she would talk to the colt, her voice soft and full of love. He saw the animal, which he had been ready to kill, nuzzle her neck. It was a symbol, and he knew it. She had saved this animal. She had saved his parents. She had saved him. Her healing was slow and scarred, but it was real. The world was, for a few short weeks, perfect. Then trouble rode in. It was a hot afternoon, the sky a hard, cloudless blue. A rider appeared on the horizon, not from the direction of Red Creek, but from the east. Wyatt was mending a fence line, and he watched the rider approach, a knot tightening in his gut. He knew that slouch. He knew that horse. The rider pulled up, a grin splitting his face. He was younger than Wyatt, with the same dark hair, but his eyes were different. They were shifty, restless. He was thinner, dressed in finer clothes that were dusty from the trail. "Brother," the man said, dismounting with a flourish, "you are a hard man to find." "Jeb," Wyatt said. His voice was flat. There was no greeting in it. "What are you doing here?" Jebediah Langston, Wyatt's estranged younger brother, laughed. "Is that any way to greet your family? I came to see the old folks, and to talk business." Wyatt just stared at him. Jeb had always meant trouble. He was a man of quick money, bad cards, and empty promises. "They are inside," Wyatt said, turning back to his fence post. "Say your piece and be on your way." "Not so fast, brother." Jeb's smile faded. "I heard you are back. Heard you are running the place again. That means it is profitable. I figured it was time I came for my share." Wyatt stopped. He slowly turned, his eyes like blue ice. "Your share? You sold your share to me 10 years ago. You took the money and you lost it in a card game in St. Louis." "That was then," Jeb protested. "I was young. You took advantage. I am family, Wyatt, blood. You owe me." "I owe you nothing." "We will see what Pa has to say about that." Jeb sneered, and he pushed past Wyatt, striding toward the house. Wyatt followed him, his fists clenched, a cold dread rising in him. The confrontation happened in the main room. Silas was in his chair. Clara was in the bedroom, helping Eliza with her midday meal.
Pa!
Jeb cried, his voice full of false cheer.
You look well. You look old. But you are breathing.
Silas's face, which had been so calm, was now pale and worried.
Jebediah, son, we were not expecting you.
I know. Thought I would surprise you. Jeb looked around the small, clean room. His eyes narrowed. Place looks different, cleaner. You hire a new girl? Just then, Clara stepped out of the bedroom. She stopped when she saw the stranger, her hand holding a tray, faltering. Jeb's eyes swept over her. He took in the clean dress, the way she held herself. He saw the silver locket at her throat. His eyes, for a second, widened in recognition. Then a slow, ugly smile spread across his face. Well, well, he said, his voice dripping with insinuation. I see. You did not just hire help, brother. You went and found yourself a housekeeper. He looked at the locket again. And you gave her Sarah's locket. My God, Wyatt, have you lost your mind?
Jeb,
Wyatt said, his voice a low, lethal warning.
Get out. Get out? I just got here. I want to talk about my ranch, about my inheritance.
There is no inheritance.
Jeb,
Silas said, his voice trembling. The ranch belongs to Wyatt. All of it. You know that.
He tricked you,
Jeb yelled, his false charm gone, replaced by a raw, whining anger. He has been building an empire, and he left us here to rot. And now he is spending his money on this. He jabbed a finger at Clara, who stood frozen by the door. Who is she? Wyatt? One of your girls from Cheyenne? Her name, Wyatt said, stepping between Jeb and Clara, shielding her, is Mrs. Clara Sutton. She is a guest in this house, and you will not speak to her. Mrs. Sutton? Jeb laughed, a high, nasty sound. Sutton, wait, I know that name. Red Creek was talking about it. The horse thief's widow. That is who this is. The town's bad omen. Clara made a small, broken sound.
Jeb, I am warning you,
Wyatt snarled. You are warning me. Jeb was furious now, his face red. You are threatening your own blood. For her. I came here for what is mine, and I find you have given our sister's locket to a piece of trash, a woman who, they say, cursed her own baby to death. That was it. Wyatt moved. He did not yell. He did not argue. He hit his brother. It was the same cold, brutal punch he had used on Al Driscoll. Jeb crashed backward, hitting the table, scattering the tin plates. He clutched his jaw, spitting blood. You are insane. Jeb spat, scrambling to his feet. You are truly insane. You think you can just punch the world. Wyatt, you think that fixes it? He pointed a shaking finger at his brother. You listen to me. I have friends. You have investors. You think those men in Cheyenne, those ranchers you want to partner with, are going to do business with a man who is marrying trash. You think they will associate with the horse thief's widow? She will ruin you. I will make sure of it. I will ride to every ranch, to every bank. I will tell them all. You will be finished.
Get out,
Wyatt said.
Fine,
Jeb screamed. He grabbed his hat.
I will go, but you will regret this. You are going to throw it all away. You are going to throw away your name, your money, your whole life.
He paused at the door, his eyes full of venom. He looked at Wyatt, and then his gaze slid past him, to the shadows in the hallway where Clara had retreated. You are going to throw it all away, he whispered, a final, poisoned dart. For a woman who was half-starved and slept in barns? He slammed the door. The sound echoed in the sudden, terrible silence. Wyatt stood, his chest heaving, his fist still bloody. His father was shaking in his chair. Wyatt, Silas whispered. He is, oh God. Wyatt did not hear him. He was turning. Clara? The hallway was empty. He strode to the pantry room. It was empty. He went to his bedroom. Empty. He could hear his mother calling weakly from her room.
"What is happening? Wyatt? Clara?"
He did not answer. He ran back to the main room, his heart a cold stone in his chest. He looked at the peg where her shawl hung. It was gone. He ripped the front door open and ran outside. The yard was empty. The mare she rode was gone. The colt was standing at the barn fence. Nickerin G confused, looking down the track that led to the creek.
"Clara!" he roared.
There was no answer but the wind. She had heard it. She had heard the last part, the truest part. A woman who was half-starved and slept in barns. That was all she was. She was not a partner. She was not a healer. She was a ruin. And she was doing what she always did. She was ruining him. He had punched his own brother for her. He was willing to lose his business for her.
She was a curse. The town was right. Jeb was right.
She ran. She took the mare, but she did not ride to town. She rode to the creek, to the place where she had found the colt, where she had thought she was finding herself. She did not feel the ride. She did not feel the cold spring air. She dismounted, leaving the mare to graze. And she walked. She walked to the bank, where the water was running high and fast with melted snow. She sat on the cold, damp earth. She looked at the water. She had not brought a coat. She had not brought anything. She had left the locket on the small table in the pantry. She could not take it. It was for family. She was not family. She was a barn cat he had let inside. Wyatt was a storm. He tore back into the house, his face terrible.
"Father, where is she? Which way did she go?"
"I do not know. Son, toward the creek, maybe?" Silas was terrified. Wyatt saw it, on the small table by the pantry, the silver locket, coiled on the rough wood. He felt a hook in his gut, as if Jeb had punched him. She had left it. She had left him. The anger that had fueled him turned to a cold, black panic. He ran back out, grabbing his own horse. He did not saddle it. He just grabbed the bridle, threw himself on its bare back, and rode. The rain started. It was not a storm. It was a cold, weeping spring rain that turned the air to a miserable gray mist. He rode to the creek, his heart pounding against his ribs. He saw the mare first, grazing peacefully, and then he saw her. She was sitting by the water's edge, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was soaked. Her dress, the new blue one, was dark with water and mud. She was staring at the rushing water. She was perfectly still. She looked so small, a broken thing left out in the rain. He slid off the horse, his legs unsteady.
"Clara!"
She did not turn. She did not seem to hear him. "Clara!" He walked to her, his boots sinking in the mud. He touched her shoulder. She was freezing. Her skin was like ice. You should not have come," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Jeb is right. I am what he said. I am bringing you down. I am a bad omen. I will not be the one who ruins you."
"Get up,"
he said, his voice raw with a fury that was not for her. It was for the world. It was for Jeb. It was for his own stupidity. "No, I will just sit here. I am so tired. Wyatt, I am so tired of fighting."
"Damn it, Clara, get up."
"Please, just go. Let me go." He looked at her, at the absolute defeat in her eyes. The anger broke. It shattered, leaving only a vast, aching hole. He was heartbroken. He did not argue. He did not plead. He simply bent, put one arm under her knees and the other around her back, and he lifted her from the ground. She was light as a child. She was freezing, her body shaking in a violent, uncontrolled tremor. She did not fight him. She had no fight left. She just let her head fall against his chest, a small, weary sigh leaving her. He carried her back to his horse. He mounted, pulling her up to sit in front of him, her back against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, trying to force his own warmth into her. He turned the horse and rode back to the ranch, his jaw set, his heart a cold, hard knot of fear and love. He carried her into the house. Silas cried out, "Is she—" She is fine. Wyatt snapped. She is cold. Go to your room. Father, please. He carried her straight past the pantry, straight past her old bedroll. He carried her into his room, to his bed, and laid her down. He did not care about the mud. He did not care about anything but the cold of her skin. He stirred the embers in his own small fireplace, adding wood until a fire roared. He turned back to her. She was watching him, her eyes wide and dark in her pale face. You have to get out of these clothes, he said, his voice thick. He did not wait for her to move. His hands were rough, but not unkind. He unbuttoned the new blue dress, the one he had bought her. He pulled the wet, cold fabric off her. He stripped her down to her thin, damp underthings. And then he pulled those off, too. He grabbed the heavy wool blanket from his bed and wrapped her in it, pulling her up. He sat her in the chair by the fire. He rubbed her hands, her arms, his own hands shaking. You are so cold, he whispered. You are so damn cold. Wyatt, she cried, the tears finally coming, hot and painful. He is right. I will destroy you. No, he said, kneeling in front of her, his hands holding her face. He is not right. He is a fool. He is a greedy, empty man. He does not know you. But what he said, it was true. I was that woman. I am that woman. You are not, he said, his voice fierce. You are not. The rain lashed against the window. The fire spat. He was kneeling. She was wrapped in his blanket. The passion that had been building for months. The shared grief. The secret touches. The terror of this day. It all converged. He looked at her, and his heart was so full it felt like it would burst. He leaned in and kissed her. He kissed the tears from her face. He kissed her mouth. And this time, it was not the hurried, hungry kiss of the porch. It was not the desperate promise of the kitchen. It was everything. It was pain, and it was need, and it was the raw, terrified recognition that he could not, would not, live without her. He pulled her from the chair, and they half fell, half knelt on the rug before the fire. They made love. It was not gentle. It was not soft. It was a raw, rain-soaked, desperate coming together. It was a promise made in the flesh. It was his body telling hers that she was not a curse. She was not a bad omen. She was his. It was her body, clinging to his, finally, letting go of the fear, and accepting that she was home. After they lay on the rug, tangled in the blanket, the fire warm on their skin. The rain had softened. She was no longer shaking. She lay with her head on his chest, her hand over his heart, the one he had given his sister's locket. He held her, his hand stroking her damp hair. He was furious. He was heartbroken. And he was, for the first time in his life, perfectly, terrifyingly, at peace. She stirred, looking up at him in the firelight. They will hate you. Let them. Your investor's your brother. He looked down at her. His eyes were soft, but held a fierceness that was more powerful than any anger he had ever shown. He put his fingers under her chin, making her look at him. They do not matter, he said, his voice a raw promise. You do. The morning after the rain, the world was quiet. They woke in Wyatt's bed, the early light gray and sober. The passion of the night had cooled, leaving them with the hard, cold reality of what they had done. Clara felt the locket was gone. Her hand flew to her throat, a small, panicked gesture. She felt naked without it. Wyatt rose from the bed, his bruised ribs no doubt aching. He pulled on his trousers, his back to her. He was silent, his movements stiff. Clara's stomach tightened. She had seen this before. The passion, then the regret, the shame. She had given him what he wanted, and now he would send her away. She was, after all, the woman who slept in barns. She watched him leave the room. He did not look back. She closed her eyes, a single, hot tear of shame slipping down her temple. She was a fool. The door opened again. He was standing there. He was not looking at her with regret. His face was set in the hard, resolute lines she had seen him use with other men. He was holding the silver locket. "You left this," he said. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact. He crossed to the bed, sat on the edge, and held it out. She did not move. "Turn around," he commanded, his voice soft but full of iron. She did. She sat up, the rough blanket clutched to her chest, and turned her back to him. She felt the cool metal slide around her neck, and the familiar weight settle into the hollow of her throat. His fingers, rough and calloused, brushed her skin as he fastened the clasp. "It stays on you," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It is yours. You are mine." It was not a question. It was a declaration of ownership, a brand, and in that moment, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. Wyatt was not a man for half measures. He had made his choice. Now, the world would know it. He rode to Red Creek 3 days later. He did not take Clara. This was not a trip for dresses. This was a trip for war. He walked into the Red Spur Saloon, the one place where the ranchers and stockmen gathered. The room went quiet when he entered. Al Driscoll, the man he had punched, was in the corner, a dark bruise still coloring his jaw. Henderson, the shopkeeper, was at the bar, and he looked pale. Wyatt walked to the bar. Whiskey. The bartender poured. Wyatt took the glass, but did not drink. He turned to face the room. "I am here to say one thing," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner. "Jebediah Langston, my brother, is no longer welcome on my ranch. Any man who does business with him is no longer doing business with me. He is a thief." A low murmur went through the room. This was family business, and it was ugly. "Second," Wyatt continued, his voice like granite, "I am announcing my intention. I am to marry Mrs. Clara Sutton. Her name is my name. Her honor is my honor. I am telling you this as a courtesy. I am not asking for your blessing." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, and it was cold. Men stared into their glasses. An old rancher, Hiram Wells, a man Wyatt had respected, cleared his throat. "Langston," he said, his voice grave, "you need to rethink this. That woman, her past, it is not clean. It is not just about you. It is about the name. It is about our association." "My association," Wyatt said, "is with Mrs. Sutton. If that bothers you, Hiram, the door is right there." He put a coin on the bar, leaving the whiskey untouched, and walked out. He had drawn his line in the dirt. The backlash was not a flood. It was a slow, rising tide of poison. The society women of Red Creek, led by Mrs. Gable, were the first. They saw Clara as an affront to decency, a threat to their own secure positions. They did not throw rocks. They used whispers. The small acts of community kindness that had, even in their shunning, occasionally reached the ranch, stopped completely. No one rode out to see how Silas and Eliza were faring. No one sent word about the state of the roads. The Langston Ranch was cut off, an island of ill repute. Then came the letter. A rider brought it from Cheyenne. It was from the bank, from the consortium of investors Wyatt had spent years cultivating. He read it standing by the window, his face impassive. Clara watched him. "What is it, Wyatt?" He did not answer for a moment. He just folded the paper, his movements precise, deadly. "What is it?" she asked again, touching his arm. "They have heard disturbing rumors," he said, his voice flat, quoting the letter. "They question the stability of my leadership. They are concerned about my association with disreputable persons." "They mean me," she whispered, her heart turning to ice. "They mean they are cowards," he spat. "What will they do?" "They are threatening to pull their funding for the summer cattle drive, unless I reconsider my position." He looked at her, his eyes dark. Unless I get rid of you.
Oh, Wyatt. She sank into a chair. I told you I was a ruin. I am doing it. I am destroying you.
You are doing nothing, he said, and he threw the letter into the fire. They are weak men. I have built my holdings on my own back. I will do it again. But the weight of it settled on the house. The strain was more than the old timbers could bear. The news, the shunning, the fight with Jeb. It all fell on Wyatt's mother. Eliza, who had been improving, relapsed. The small cough she had developed returned, but this time it was deep and wet, and it racked her frail body. The fever came back, and it came with a vengeance. I need the doctor, Wyatt said, his face grim. He rode to town, but Dr. Miles was unavailable. He was out on a call to the North Range. It was a lie. Wyatt knew it. The town was closing ranks. They were punishing him, using his mother. He returned to the ranch empty-handed, his rage a cold, killing thing. When he walked in, he found Clara. She had not been weeping. She had been working. She had moved her own small cot from the pantry into Eliza's room. She had her herb chest open. The house smelled of boiled thyme and mustard plaster.
She is in a bad way,
Clara said, her voice quiet, professional. She was no longer the lover or the outcast. She was the healer.
Her lungs are full. I need to break the fever.
For the next 3 days, Clara did not sleep. She did not leave the room. She was a general, fighting a war against the sickness. She bathed Eliza's face. She forced tiny spoonfuls of hot, herb-laced broth between her lips. She sat, day and night, holding the old woman's hand, whispering to her, "You are a fighter. Eliza, I know you are. You cannot leave him. You stay. You fight with me." Wyatt watched from the doorway. He was useless. He, the man who could punch ranchers and build empires, could do nothing against this. He saw Clara, thin and pale with exhaustion, her eyes burning with a fierce, protective light. The town had shunned her harder than ever, and her response was to pour every last ounce of her life into saving the mother of the man who had caused it. His love for her, which had been a fire, became something else. It became an ache, a deep, profound, and painful reverence. On the third night, the crisis came. The fever was at its peak. Eliza was delirious, muttering about her childhood, about her long-dead sister, Sarah. Wyatt stood in the shadows of the room, believing he was watching his mother die. Clara was bathing her forehead with a cool cloth. Eliza's eyes suddenly snapped open. They were not cloudy. They were perfectly, terribly clear.
"Clara,"
she whispered, her voice like dry leaves.
"I am here, Mrs. Langston."
Clara wept, leaning close.
"I am here, Eliza."
"Eliza." A small smile touched the old woman's lips.
"Good. You are a good girl."
Her eyes flickered, finding Wyatt in the darkness.
"My son, he is iron, hard, but brittle. He will break, you know? He needs you to be his strength." "I will, Eliza, I promise,"
Clara sobbed.
"I know."
Eliza's gaze came back to Clara. Her hand, thin as a bird's claw, gripped Clara's.
You are already his wife. Clara, you are just not in paper."
She took a ragged, painful breath. Do not let him lose you. He is a fool, but he is my fool. Do not let him lose you." The clarity was gone. Her eyes rolled back, and she slipped into a deep, gasping sleep. But her breathing, for the first time, was less ragged. The fever, at its peak, had broken. She was not dying. She was fighting. Wyatt stepped out of the room, his hands shaking. He had heard it all. You are already his wife. Clara came out an hour later. Her shoulders slumped.
"She is sleeping. The fever is down. I think she will live."
Wyatt just looked at her. He saw the exhaustion, the love, The power in this woman. His mother was right. He did not speak. He walked to the peg, took his hat, and left the house. He rode. He did not ride to check cattle. He rode to Red Creek. It was just after dawn. He rode straight to the courthouse, to the small office of the county clerk. A man named Peters. He slammed the door open, waking the man at his desk. "Langston, what in God's name?" "I need the papers," Wyatt said. "What papers?" "The marriage papers. The intent now." The clerk stammered, his eyes wide. He had heard the rumors. He looked at Wyatt's face, at the cold promise of violence in his eyes, and he did not argue. He pulled out the ledger. "That will be $2, he said, his voice trembling. Wyatt threw a $5 gold piece on the desk. "Keep it. Just give me the certificate." He rode back to the ranch, the paper folded in his coat pocket. He felt calm. The decision was made. The world had done its worst, and he was still standing. She was still standing. He found her in the main room. She was washing the basins from the sick room. She looked up, startled. As he entered, she looked like a ghost, pale and worn. But the locket was still at her throat. He did not offer a grand speech. He was not that man. He just pulled the paper from his pocket and held it out to her. She wiped her hands on her apron and took it. She unfolded it. She read the names. Wyatt Langston, Clara Sutton. Her hands began to shake. She looked up at him. Her eyes flooded with a terrible, painful understanding. "No," she whispered. "It is done," he said. "We just need the preacher."
"No!"
Her voice was stronger.
"No, Wyatt, I will not."
"What are you talking about? I have the paper."
"I will not,"
she said, and she thrust the paper back at him, her eyes full of tears.
"I will not be your ruin. I saw the letter. I hear the town. I know what they are doing. This paper, this makes it real. This is the end of your legacy. I will not sign it. I will not be the woman who tears down the Langston name."
She was pushing him away, to save him. He looked at her, at this impossible, stubborn, selfless woman. He looked at the paper in his hand. He thought of his mother's words. He thought of the bank, and the ranchers, and his brother. He took a deep breath, and then, slowly, deliberately, he tore the marriage certificate in half. Clara gasped.
"Wyatt, what have you done?"
He tore the halves into quarters and let the pieces drift to the floor.
"That legacy,"
he said, his voice low and fierce.
"That name, it is just dust. It is the bank. It is men like Hiram Wells. It is my brother. It is their rules, not mine. It is nothing."
He stepped close, so close he could feel the heat of her, the exhaustion, the fear. He put his hands on her shoulders. "I am building a new legacy. Clara, I am building it right here, on this land, with you." He tapped his finger against the locket. "This is our church. This is our paper. I do not need theirs. I just need you." Before she could answer, a sound cut through the quiet morning. It was a high-pitched, terrified screaming. It was the horses. Wyatt and Clara looked at each other, and in the same instant, they knew. "Smoke," Clara whispered. Wyatt was out the door in a second. Clara was right behind him. The world was lit by an unnatural, roaring orange light. The barn was on fire. Flames were already licking up the dry, aged wood, climbing toward the hayloft. The main doors were ablaze, set from the outside. "Jeb," Wyatt snarled. The name was a curse.
"The animals!" Clara screamed. "The horses, the 2 milk cows, and her colt. They were all trapped inside."
"The wind! It is a firestorm!" Wyatt yelled, pointing to the south. A hot, dry wind was fanning the flames, turning the barn into a furnace. He took the herd. The north pasture gate is open." Jeb had taken his revenge. He had stolen the cattle and set the fire to cover his escape. Or perhaps, just to destroy what he could not have. "The back gate!" Wyatt roared. "It is the only way." They were not a cattle baron and an outcast. They were a team. He grabbed an axe from the woodpile. Clara grabbed a bucket. They ran to the back of the barn. The smoke was thick, rolling in black, acrid clouds. The animals were screaming, a sound of pure terror. Wyatt smashed the wooden bar on the back gate. He kicked it open. "Get them out! Clara, drive them! Drive them to the creek!" He ran into the choking smoke, swatting at the terrified cows, forcing them out. The horses followed, their eyes white with panic. "They are out!" Wyatt yelled, coughing, his eyes streaming. "All of them!" "No!" Clara screamed, her voice tight with panic. She was peering into the smoke. "The colt! He is still in his stall! He is trapped!" "Clara, no! It is too much! The loft is going!" He turned to grab her, but she was gone. She had tied her apron over her mouth and run, a small, gray shape disappearing into the blackness. "Clara!" He ran in after her. It was hell. The air was fire. He could not breathe. He could barely see. He heard the colt screaming, and he heard Clara coughing and calling to it. He found her. She was in the stall, fighting with the latch, which had been warped by the heat. The colt was kicking, crazed with fear. "Get back!" Wyatt roared. He put his shoulder to the stall door and broke it open. At that exact moment, the main beam in the hayloft gave way. It crashed down, a shower of fire and sparks, exactly where they had been standing a second before. "Now!" Wyatt yelled. He grabbed the colt's rope, grabbed Clara's arm, and dragged them both toward the light of the open gate. They burst out into the yard, falling to their knees, gasping the clean, cold air. The animals were safe, huddled by the creek, watching the blaze. The barn was a roaring inferno. They were alive. Wyatt was on his hands and knees, his lungs on fire. He looked at Clara. She was coughing, a terrible, dry, racking sound. She was trying to get her breath. "Clara?" She looked at him. Her face was black with soot. I, she gasped. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She swayed, and then she collapsed onto the dirt. She was not breathing. "No," Wyatt whispered. The panic that had gripped him at the creek was nothing. This was a black, empty void. "No, no!" He scooped her up. She was limp, a dead weight. He ran, carrying her away from the smoke, toward the house. He laid her on the porch, in the cool dawn air. "Clara!" he yelled, shaking her. Her head just lolled. "No, you do not get to do this. You do not." He put his mouth over hers, forcing his own air into her lungs. He pushed on her chest. He was desperate. "Breathe!" he roared, his voice breaking. "Damn it, woman! You breathe! You saved my mother! You saved my ranch! You saved me! You do not get to leave me! You fight! You fight!" He was weeping. The great hard cattle baron was on his knees, his face black with soot, begging the sky. He pressed his ear to her chest. Nothing. "Live," he whispered, a broken prayer. "Please, live." A small, choked cough, a tiny, ragged gasp. Her chest moved. She coughed again, a painful, tearing sound, and her eyes, caked with ash, fluttered open. She was breathing. Wyatt fell back, sitting on the porch, his head in his hands. A sound left him, something between a sob and a laugh. He did not care. Dawn was breaking. The barn was a heap of smoking, blackened timbers. Wyatt had not left her side. He had carried her to his bed, cleaned the soot from her face, and sat in the chair, watching her, just watching her breathe. His parents were in the main room, shocked into silence by the night of fire and fear. Clara stirred. Her throat felt like it was full of hot coals. She opened her eyes. Wyatt was there. His face was stained with soot, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked broken. "Wyatt?" Her voice was a raw whisper. The colt?" He let out that broken laugh again.
He is fine. You saved him. You saved all of them.
He looked tired. He looked like he had been through a war. He reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out the locket. The chain was broken.
It must have snapped,
he said, his voice thick.
When you fell.
He had been clutching it in his fist all night. He had tied the broken chain together in a simple, rough knot. She sat up, wincing at the pain in her lungs. He did not wait. He leaned forward and, for the second time, fastened the locket around her neck.
Wyatt,
she whispered.
The barn, your legacy, it is all gone.
No, he said, and he took her hand. It was raw and blistered from the fire. He held it gently. It is right here. He looked into her eyes. The hardness was gone. The anger was gone. There was only a deep, profound, and steady light.
Clara Sutton,
he said, his voice clear and strong in the quiet, dawn-lit room.
I tore up the paper because the paper does not matter. The town does not matter. The bank does not matter. The barn does not matter. None of it.
He raised her blistered hand to his lips. Will you marry me, here, on this ranch, with my parents as witness, with or without the town's blessing? Will you be my wife? She looked at him, the soot still on his face, the rawness in his eyes. He was offering her not just his name, but his life. He was offering to build a new one, from the ashes of the old, the fear she had lived with for so long, the cold, gnawing fear of being a curse, finally broke. It did not just crack, it shattered, and was washed away by the simple, steady look in his eyes.
Yes,
she whispered, her throat raw from the smoke.
Wyatt, yes, I will.
They were not married by a preacher. No preacher from Red Creek would have made the ride. They were not married in a church. Their church was the smoking ruin of the barn, the new green of the spring grass, and the vast, unblinking Wyoming sky. The ceremony was held 3 days later. The air still smelled of smoke, a sharp, constant reminder of what they had lost. But the wind was from the west, and it carried the scent of pine and clean, melted snow. Clara wore the simple cream-colored dress he had bought her. It was the plainest of the new ones, but to her, it was finer than any silk. At her throat, where the broken chain had been mended with a knot of wire by Wyatt's own rough hands, hung the small silver locket. It was her armor. Wyatt did not wear the long duster coat of the cattle baron. He wore his father's old Sunday coat. It was dark wool, worn at the elbows, and it smelled of cedar and thyme. It was the coat of a son, of a man tied to family, not to business. Their witnesses were few. There was Silas, sitting in his old chair, which Wyatt and one of the hands had carried out into the yard. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright, and he held a worn family Bible in his lap. There was Eliza, too weak to stand, but they had pushed her bed to the open window of her room. She watched, her hand resting on the sill, a tear of pure, quiet joy tracing a path through the wrinkles on her cheek. And there were 2 others, Hap and Miguel. They were the only 2 ranch hands who had stayed on. They were men loyal not to Wyatt's money, but to the man himself. They stood a few feet back, their hats in their hands, their faces scrubbed clean, looking on with a rough, respectful awe. The sky was their roof, the wind was their hymn. Wyatt stood before Clara. He did not have a ring. He had nothing left to give her but what was in his hands and his heart. Silas cleared his throat, his voice thin but steady. "We are here," he said, his voice carrying on the wind. Not by the laws of a town that has forgotten its way, but by the law of God, and the law of this land. A man and a woman they choose. They choose to build. They choose to stand. And that is a marriage. He looked at his son. "Wyatt, do you take this woman, Clara Sutton, to be your wife, to be your partner, to shield her and to honor her, and to build a life with her, from this day until the end?" Wyatt never looked at his father. His eyes were locked on Clara's. They were the only two people on earth. "I do," he said, his voice deep and sure. "I will." Silas smiled, his gaze turning to Clara. "And do you, Clara, take this man, Wyatt Langston, to be your husband, to stand with him, to be his partner, and his comfort, to build a life with him, from this day until the end?" Clara looked at this man who had saved her, this man she had saved, this man who had seen the ruin in her, and had not turned away, but had called it strength. "I do," she whispered, and her voice did not break. "I am his." "Then," Silas said, "in the eyes of God and those of us here you are one. You are Mr. and Mrs. Langston. Son, you may kiss your wife." Wyatt did not hesitate. He stepped forward and put his hands on her face. He did not kiss her with the fire of their passion or the desperation of their fear. He kissed her with a deep, quiet reverence. He kissed her with a promise that needed no words. It was a kiss of homecoming. It was a kiss of peace. When he pulled back, Hap and Miguel, forgetting their shyness, let out a small whoop. Eliza was weeping silently into her handkerchief, and Silas just closed the Bible, his face full of a light Clara had never seen. Life did not become easy. It was, in fact, harder than ever. The fire had taken the barn, the winter hay, the tools, and half their tack. Jeb had stolen more than half the cattle. The Langston ranch was on its knees. But it was not broken. Wyatt, Clara, Hap, and Miguel began to rebuild. They did not have the money for milled lumber from Cheyenne. They rode to the high country, and Wyatt, his arms straining, cut the timber himself. They hauled it back, and the sound of axes and hammers replaced the sound of silence. Clara was not inside. She was not just a wife. She was the partner he had promised she would be. She took over the spring planting, not just of a small garden, but of the fields. She knew crop rotation from her childhood. She knew how to make the weary land produce. She worked from sunup to sundown, her new, fine dresses packed away, her old, mended calico back on, her hands blistering, then healing, then blistering again. And slowly, the community began to notice. Their first trip to town as husband and wife was a trial. The whispers followed them. Mrs. Gable, the preacher's wife, saw them, lifted her nose in the air, and crossed the street to avoid walking on the same boardwalk. Clara flinched. Wyatt just tightened his grip on her arm. "Keep walking," he murmured. But as they entered the mercantile, something different happened. Henderson, the shopkeeper, who had been so oily and disrespectful, looked at them. He saw the soot still on Wyatt's hat. He saw the blisters on Clara's hands. He saw two people who had faced fire and ruin and were still standing. "Mr. Langston, Mrs. Langston," he said, and the Mrs. was not a sneer. It was respectful. "I heard about the fire, and about Jeb. A terrible thing." He leaned forward. "I have a stock of new axes, good steel, and 2 kegs of nails. I can let you have them on credit. Until the fall." Wyatt was stunned. It was a small gesture, but it was the first. "Thank you, Henderson. I will take them." It was the beginning. The women of the town might still shun her, but the men of the frontier respected grit. They respected survival. Hiram Wells, the old rancher who had warned Wyatt against this, rode out to the ranch a week later. He sat on his horse for a long time, just watching Wyatt and his men drag a new ridgepole into place. He watched Clara, her face smudged with dirt, directing the planting of the south pasture for grazing. He finally rode over Langston. Wyatt nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Wells, heard you lost your investors," Hiram said, chewing on a piece of straw. "You heard right. Heard they are a bunch of fools in shiny boots." Hiram spat. "I also heard you are rebuilding with your own hands, and your wife's." He looked over at Clara. She met his gaze, unafraid. Hiram nodded, as if a decision had been made. You are running a small herd, but you will need to get through next winter. I have a few dozen head I can spare. Calves. You can pay me back when you are able.
Wyatt stared at the man. This was more than nails. This was a future.
Why? Wyatt asked, his voice thick.
Hiram looked at Wyatt, then at Clara. Because those men in Cheyenne, they invest in paper. I invest in people. I invest in backbone. And I like the look of your new partner.
He tipped his hat, a gesture of deep, profound respect toward Clara, Mrs. Langston.
He rode away.
Wyatt turned to Clara. She had tears in her eyes. The town was not their enemy anymore. Not all of it. They had earned its respect. The letter from Cheyenne came a week later. It was not from the bank. It was from the United States Marshal's office in Laramie. Wyatt opened it, his hands steady. Clara stood beside him, her hand on his back. It was short. It said that Jebediah Langston had been arrested. He had been caught trying to sell a herd of cattle with a fresh, clumsily altered brand. The buyer, a man from Montana, had recognized the underlying Langston mark and, having heard rumors of Wyatt's grit, had sent for the marshal. The letter said Jeb was in jail, awaiting trial. It asked if Wyatt would come to Laramie to testify against him. Wyatt read the letter twice. Clara watched his face. He was not angry. He was not happy. He looked tired. "Will you go?" she asked softly. He folded the letter. He thought of his brother, the boy he had grown up with, the man who had turned to venom and greed. He thought of the fire. He thought of Clara, collapsed and soot-covered in the dirt. "Yes," he said, "I will go." He rode out 2 days later. He was gone for a week. When he returned, Clara was waiting on the porch. He dismounted, and the weariness of the world was on his shoulders. "It is done," he said, and he did not need to say more.
How was he?" she asked.
"He was small," Wyatt said, and that was the only word. He was just a small, angry man. He yelled. He cursed me. He said I owed him. "And what did you say?" "Nothing," Wyatt said. "I just told the judge the truth. I told him what he stole. I told him about the fire. I did not ask for mercy. I just asked for justice." Jeb was sentenced to 20 years. Justice had arrived. But as Wyatt sat on the porch, his hand in Clara's, he felt no joy. He felt no victory. He just felt the end of something. The long, painful, festering wound of his old family was finally closed. He was free. The ranch was quiet. The summer came, hot and dry. But the crops Clara had planted held. The new calves from Hiram Wells fattened on the south pasture. The new barn, smaller but stronger than the old one, was finished. They found their peace in the small things. They found it in the mornings. Wyatt would rise before dawn, and she would already have the coffee boiling. He would stand behind her at the stove, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin on her shoulder, and they would watch the sky turn from gray to purple to rose. They would not speak. They did not need to. They found it in his parents. Eliza was out of her bed. She sat on the porch now, in a chair beside Silas. Her lungs were still weak, but her smile was not. She and Silas would sit for hours, holding hands like young lovers, just watching the ranch, their son's ranch, come back to life. They found it in the colt, Creek. They called him. He was fully grown now, a strong, handsome buckskin, but he had not lost his devotion. He ran free with the new herd, but he would always come to the fence when Clara called, pushing his head against her for a scrap of apple. He was their reminder. He was the scarred, broken thing that had been saved. Life was hard. It was still a fight, but it was not a lonely one. One afternoon in late summer, when the hills were turning to gold, Clara asked Wyatt to hitch the wagon. "Where are we going?" he asked. "There is a place I need to see," she said quietly, "and I do not want to go alone anymore." He knew. He did not ask again. He hitched the wagon, and they rode out. They did not go to town. They went east, toward the burned-out shell of a cabin that had once been hers. They went to the small, neglected cemetery on the hill behind it. Wyatt stopped the wagon. He helped her down. He stood by the gate, his hat in his hand, giving her a quiet strength. She walked to the small, simple wooden cross. The weeds had grown high. Rose Sutton, beloved daughter. Clara knelt. She had not been here since the day of the burial. She had been too afraid of the whispers, afraid of the judgment, and most of all, afraid of the crushing, bottomless grief. She pulled the weeds. Her hands were no longer blistered. They were strong and calloused. She pulled away the thorns and the dry grass. She uncovered the small, gray stones that Amos, in one of his last good acts, had placed around the edge. She had brought something, a small bundle of wildflowers, yellow ones, the day stars she had told Wyatt about. She laid them on the cleared earth. She did not weep, not the way she had before. The grief was still there, a dull ache, but it was not a storm. It was just a part of her, a scar, like the locket at her throat. "Hello, my Rose," she whispered. I missed you. I wanted you to know. I wanted to tell you I am all right. Your mama, she is all right now. I am happy." She knelt there for a long time. Wyatt did not move. He just watched her, his heart so full it felt like it would break. He was her guard. He was her shield. He would let nothing and no one hurt her here. Finally, she stood. She looked at the grave, and then she turned to him. She walked back, her step light. She put her hand in his. "Thank you, Wyatt," she said. "It is all right," he said, his voice thick. "Let's go home," she said, and this time, she knew what the word meant. The final scene, the one that mattered most, did not happen with a crowd. It happened, as all the real things did, in the quiet. It was sunset. The sky was a blaze of orange and purple, the kind of sky that makes a person feel small and eternal all at once. They were sitting on the porch, on the new steps Wyatt had built. Silas and Eliza were inside, asleep. The ranch was still. The only sounds were the crickets starting their night song, and the horses full and content, blowing softly in the new paddock. Clara was leaning against Wyatt's shoulder. He was leaning back against the post. His arm was around her, his hand resting gently on her stomach. It was a simple, possessive, protective gesture. He had been doing it a lot, lately. She covered his hand with her own. "Do you think," she whispered, her voice so quiet it was almost just a breath, "do you think it could be time again?" He knew what she was asking. She was not just asking if she was pregnant. She was asking if the curse was gone. She was asking if she was allowed to hope. She was asking if she could be a mother again, without the world or God or fate tearing it away. Wyatt turned his head. He looked at her. Her face, in the dying light, was no longer the thin, haunted face of a starved widow. It was the face of a beautiful woman, his wife. His eyes were soft, the hard blue softened to the color of the dusk, but underneath, the fierceness was still there. It was the fierce underscore-ness of a protector. "You gave me everything," he said, his voice a low, raw promise. "You gave me my parents. You gave me this ranch. You gave me me." He tightened his hand over hers, over the slight, new curve of her belly. "I will give this child the world." Thank you for listening to this story from the Wild West Campfire. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please comment with where you are listening from and connect with other folks around the fire. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and share your feelings on Wyatt and Clara's journey.